I always find my iPad to be in this awkward position between my iPhone and my MacBook. It got all these amazing hardware and powerful chips, but I never really felt quite useful enough to replace my MacBook because of the limitation of the iPadOS. And this is until the recent Apple's announcement for the iPadOS 26, which brings it closer than ever before to being a proper computer. There are three ways you can use the iPad right now. The first one is the full screen app, as it has always been. The second one is the Windows app, which you can resize and stack open apps on top of each other like a normal computer would. And third, which is what most people in the Mac community is so hyped up about, is the Stage Manager. If you're someone who uses Stage Manager extensively on a MacBook, I think this could be a useful feature. So with this ability to do multitasking and having multiple windows of apps on top of each other, there's one question remain. Can I finally replace my MacBook with the iPad? And to answer this question, we have to look at a few key factors. First is the size. This is the iPad Pro 11 against the MacBook Air 13 and the MacBook Pro 14. And it doesn't really matter what size you pick, the MacBook is going to be bigger and heavier than the iPad. The portability of the iPad is what makes it ideal to travel around with. Being able to detach from keyboard and take handwritten notes with the Apple Pencil is something that I can't do with my MacBook. And this is the reason why I always keep my MacBook at home and only toss my iPad in the bag with me. Well, at least when I don't need the full power of a MacBook. You see, with the bigger size also comes with bigger battery life. The battery life on a MacBook is just absurdly long. It lasts for up to 18 hours, and I just never really worried about the battery life when I'm using a MacBook. And on the other hand, the battery life on the iPad can last for up to 10 hours depending on what you use it for, but the new multitasking that they just introduced is going to drain the battery life a little bit quicker. So I always have the MacBook with me whenever I know that I'm going to work on a more demanding task for longer hours. The MacBook has a lot of ports that allow me to connect with multiple external devices at once, while the iPad only has one USB port. And this is important because I can just plug in my MacBook to a USB adapter and connect to my external display while charging it with another port. But I can't do that with the iPad. I would either have to get a separate wireless charger for the iPad or invest in a docking station to be able to charge my iPad while connecting to the external display. And talk about the external display, there is no way to use the clamshell mode on the iPad. Well, at least not right now. When I turn off the display on the iPad, it also shuts down everything else. Onto the performance, the M series chips are incredible for its size. I can edit raw files for those without any problem. And although it handles video editing quite well, I would be a little bit worried depending on how long the video is and how many effects I throw at it. And the exporting time is going to be much slower than the MacBook because of the form factor. I don't have any experience when it comes to performance with engineering tasks, so if you have any experience with that, please let me know in the comment. Onto the software, macOS is a much more mature operating system. The file management is a lot easier to navigate. Although the Files app on the iPad receives some update, it still makes me want to cry every time I try to move files to different apps. The new multitasking feature on the iPad is interesting and it's a lot closer to being a MacBook right now, but I only find it useful when I plug it into an external display. And after having used it for a couple of days, I think it has more to do with the UI than the screen size. You see, on a MacBook, the apps that I have open will appear on the app dock even if I don't have it pinned. And for the ones that I have pinned, there is this little dot at the bottom that indicates which app is opened. While on the iPad, there is no indication of some sort. There is this little section that displays a few recently opened apps, but anything more than that, I would have to take a guess to which one I have opened and which one I have not. I do have to mention that this is still a developer beta, and some of these issues might or might not be fixed in the future. When it comes to apps, it's still stuck with the iPadOS App Store. Office apps like Word, Excel, and other administrative apps are mostly fine, but for more demanding apps like Adobe or DaVinci Resolve, there is going to be some features missing on the iPad version. However, I've noticed that many productivity apps on the iPad have been improved. Content creation apps like Final Cut Pro and some music recording apps have been improved as well. You do have some advantage on the iPad, mainly on note-taking and drawing apps. Apple Notes and third-party apps like GoodNotes are really fun and intuitive for handwriting. I do find drawing on Procreate and Photoshop using the Apple Pencil feels much more immersive than using the Wacom on a computer. The Preview app is also finally available on the iPad. It allows you to edit, highlight, and sign straight into the PDF, which makes productivity tasks a whole lot more efficient. And the Journal app is also finally available on the iPad, which makes it even more appealing, especially for students. When you start to compare the price of these devices, that's when it gets tricky, because the cost of the device alone does not tell the whole story. When you buy a MacBook, you get a whole computer that is ready to be used for any professional work. But when you buy an iPad, you only get the iPad. You would have to purchase the Apple Pencil and the Magic Keyboard separately. And if you want to take the full advantage of what the iPad has to offer, you would have to buy a docking station along with an external display. And depends on what spec you get, it may end up costing more than a MacBook. Which begs the question, is it worth it to spend more money just to get things more complicated? During my research for this video, I watched a bunch of people on YouTube trying to replace the MacBook with the iPad using the iPadOS 26, and also having tried myself, I realized one thing. These people who say that they can replace their MacBook with the iPad already have the MacBook. Think about it. If you already have a more powerful device laying around, then sacrificing some functionality and performance for a smaller and more versatile device as a daily drive would make a lot of sense. Because you can always have something to fall back to if you need an actual computer with more power. And they're not wrong. The iPad is smaller, lighter, and more exciting to use because of the touchscreen along with the Apple Pencil, and it makes a lot of sense for people to want to replace the MacBook with it. But at least for me, I don't think it's ready yet. If I were in the position that I can only own one of these devices, I would always choose the MacBook, which is a more well-rounded device that has proper function for professional work. Unless I absolutely need the Apple Pencil, then I would choose the iPad. I would always rather have more power than I needed than to not have enough power when I need it. Does it make sense? Some people are complaining that they still can't do pro-level computing on the iPad because of the iPadOS limitation, but I don't think it's a fair expectation. I certainly wouldn't expect to edit 4K videos from Sony FX3 on the MacBook Air, let alone the iPad. Sure, it'll work, but it would be painful. I'm not sure about you, but for me, I think having a realistic expectation when making a purchasing decision makes my life a whole lot easier. So if you are a power user who needs powerful computing to do your task, I don't think the iPad is going to replace the MacBook for you. It can do some light editing, but if you do some heavy edit or engineering work, I would just say go straight for the MacBook because it's going to save you from a lot of headache in the long run. So there you have it. I'm curious to know your thoughts on this, so let me know in the comment, and I'll see you later. Bye.